Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Arbitrary 20. In this video we're going to be making a Nova character based on the Shadowblade spell and a few night or dark themed subclasses. And you may notice this battle map poking up in front of me. We're doing a pretty big boss fight in the campaign I'm running on our channel right now, and we just wanted to leave it set up to make it a little bit easier on us. I guess if you'd like to check that episode out, I'll put it in a card up there. But let's go ahead and get into the build, starting with the race. We're going to be going with the Bugbear with its surprise attack feature. It is one of the best races in the game for first turn Nova damage. For the background, I know a lot of you aren't going to be able to use them, but the Strixhaven and Dragonlance backgrounds are really nice if you're playing in one of those settings or your DM is nice enough to let you use one of them. And for our ability scores, we have a strength of 13, a dexterity of 14, plus 2 for a total of 16, a constitution of 13, plus 1 for a total of 14, an intelligence of 8, a wisdom of 13, and a charisma of 13. And then if you're rolling for ability scores, the only score that doesn't really matter for this build is intelligence. You'll definitely want to prioritize dexterity first and constitution second, but we'll also need at least a 13 in wisdom, charisma, and strength for multi-classing purposes. And for our ideal equipment, eventually we'll want to be using Shadowblade all the time, but we'll want to pick up a rapier until we get Shadowblade, and then you'll want to pick up half plate and a shield, and I would also pick up a longbow and or some daggers if you get stuck at range. And now we'll move on to level 1. We'll be starting off with Fighter. This is mainly to pick up Constitution saving throw proficiency, but we'll also get a fighting style, and we're going to go with Superior Technique, choosing Trip Attack. This is an extra die of damage and potentially a way to get advantage on our Nova round. And then for levels 2 through 6, we're going to be taking 5 levels of Ranger. In terms of spells, the ones I would probably recommend are Absorb Elements, Goodberry, and Pass Without Trace. Absorb Elements being a really good defensive option, Goodberry being one of the best out of combat healing options, and then Pass Without Trace to boost our entire party's stealth. Depending on which way you go with this build, later on it can really benefit from surprise. And then for the fighting style from Ranger, we're going to go with Dueling. And then for our Ranger subclass, we're going to go with Gloomstalker. This gives us the Dread Ambusher and Umbral Sight features. Dread Ambusher being the main thing we want, giving us increased speed and extra attack and extra damage on the first round of combat. And on top of that, it adds our Wisdom modifier to our initiative as well. And then Umbral Sight is pretty nice as well, giving us an upgrade to our dark vision and basically free invisibility whenever we're in complete darkness. This will be another good way to get advantage on our Nova round. And then at level 4 of Ranger, we'll get an ability score increase or feat, and I would just take a +2 to dexterity. And then moving on to levels 7 through 9, we're going to take 3 levels of Sorcerer here. For the Sorcerer's Origin, pretty much any subclass will work here. I'm actually playing a character pretty similar to this in our Coming of the Dragon campaign. I will link to that campaign as well in the cards. I decided to go with the Clockwork Soul. I think the spells it gets probably makes it the best Sorcerer subclass, and I also have some synergy with the Bastion of Law feature, but feel free to pick any Sorcerer's Origin. And then some of the spells I'd recommend picking up from these first few levels of Sorcerer are Silvery Barbs, Shield, Shadowblade, and then I would go with either Web or Rhymes Binding Ice. Shield and Silvery Barbs both being really good defensive options, and then Shadowblade being the main reason we took these 3 levels of Sorcerer. It'll be our main damage spell, and then Rhymes Binding Ice and Web are some nice control options. And then lastly here from these few levels of Sorcerer, we'll get Meta Magic. The 2 options I would go with are Quicken Spell and Subtle Spell. Quicken Spell will be good for casting spells in combat and still being able to attack with our action, and then Subtle Spell is good for using spells in roleplay situations, and it'll also help us avoid counter spells in combat. And then moving on to levels 10 and 11, I would take 2 more levels of Fighter, bringing us to Fighter 3 here. You could take these Fighter levels before you start taking Sorcerer levels. I just wanted to get Shadowblade as soon as possible since this build is based on it. But from these next 2 levels of Fighter, we'll pick up Action Surge, probably the best feature in the game for Nova damage. And then for our Fighter subclass, we're going to be going with Echo Knight. We'll get Manifest Echo. This pretty much lets us be in 2 places at once. This also makes us much safer because we can basically melee attack from range. But the main thing we want here is Unleash Incarnation. We can use this to get an additional attack while we're attacking from our Echo's position. This does work with Action Surge, so this will be an extra 2 attacks on our Nova round. Though this one is only twice per long rest for us, while the rest of our Nova abilities for the most part are once per short rest, so you'll have to use this one a bit more wisely as you'll get it less often. And now that we pretty much have the core of the build together, we'll go over our tactics in combat. On the first turn, you'll want to go up to an enemy that you're going to get surprise attack against, cast Shadowblade as a bonus action, and then attack them as many times as you can. This should be 8 attacks with the combination of Dread Ambusher, Unleash Incarnation, and Action Surge. And with that, I'll be putting our Nova damage in a few different situations on the screen now. You can pause if you'd like to read it. And then moving on to levels 12 through 14, I would take 3 levels of Paladin here. In terms of spells, you can pick pretty much whatever you want. Just remember we don't have a very high charisma, so we won't have a very high spell attack roll or spell save DC. And then we'll get to Divine Smite, which is the main reason we're here, which is another very common and powerful feature for Nova damage characters. Though I think a lot of people who use this overspend their resources on it. In the damage calculations I do with Divine Smite, I'm going going to assume you use the most damaging spell slot you can, but only on critical hits. And then for our Sacred Oath, we're going to pick up the Oath of Conquest. The main thing we want here being the Guided Strike Channel Divinity. This won't show up on the damage numbers, but it will make them slightly higher, as it should turn just about any miss into a hit once per short rest. Another nice thing from this subclass is the Armor of Agathis spell. We do spend a lot of time in melee, so we should be able to get some good use out of it. And then for levels 15 through 20, I would take 6 more levels of Sorcerer here. The main reason being so we can get a 7th level spell slot and upcast Shadowblade so it deals the maximum amount of damage. But we'll also get 3rd, 4th, and 5th level spells. You can pick pretty much whatever you would like, but just like for the Paladin, remember that we don't have a very high charisma and we won't have a good spell attack or spell save DC. I would go with stuff like Fly, Counterspell, Polymorph, or Dimension Door. And then we'll also get 2 ability score increases or feats in those 6 levels of Sorcerer, and I would go with a +2 to Dexterity and the Alert feat. Increasing our Dexterity is the best way to increase our damage, and along with the Alert feat, our Initiative as well. This will allow us to get Surprise Attack more often. And that's the full build, but as a quick note here, you could also consider taking 3 levels of Assassin Rogue for the Assassinate feature. This would increase our damage a lot, but it would make us rely more on Surprise. How good this is will depend a lot on the other characters in your party and how your GM runs Surprise. If you think you'll get enough benefit from it, you can take those 3 levels of Rogue right after you take the 3rd fighter level. Then after that, you would either take 3 levels of Paladin and 6 levels of Sorcerer to still get that Paladin subclass, or you would take 2 levels of Paladin and 7 levels of Sorcerer to still get 4th level spells. I just wanted to point that out as it could potentially be a really strong option depending on your table. And our tactics are pretty much the same, but I do want to show our Nova damage here at level 20 in a few different situations. I'll show with and without the Assassin subclass. But that's all I have for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought of the build down in the comments below. If you'd like to watch my last build guide where I did a bit of a challenge build trying to build a strong character with a 7 in every ability score, you can check that out right here. Either way, thank you guys for watching. Have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.